Rough Country's 20-inch light bar that we have here will be a great option for all 2019 and newer Ram owners who are looking to get a bunch of lighting firepower on the front end of their truck, but do so in a very stealthy manner and without having to hack up your bumper or drill a bunch of holes in the process. Now, the 20-inch light bar will feature 40 individual 3-watt Cree LEDs, emitting a grand total of 9,600 lumens. Now, your price point for the bolt-on kit will hover right around that $200 mark, while the install itself is going to get a strong 2 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter, as some minor disassembly of that lower bumper area will be required to get everything in place. So adding auxiliary lighting to your truck is one of those mods that most owners tend to tackle at some point for obvious reasons of lighting up a dark trail or a dark road at night. Now, the problem usually comes down to finding a way to mount them in a clean fashion and without having to drill or cut a bunch of holes into your brand new truck. Well, Rough Country recognized this and have offered their hidden bumper 20-inch light bar kit that we're talking about here today. Now, when installed, the 20-inch LED light bar will live right behind that lower grille in your factory bumper in a way that could almost be mistaken for a factory edition, as the install is just that clean. Now, the centerpiece of this kit is no doubt the 20-inch Black Series light bar from Rough Country that will pack a durable aluminum housing sealed tight with that polycarbonate lens that helps the Rough Country option achieve a waterproof rating of an IP67. Pretty much standard stuff in the auxiliary lighting world. Now, one thing I do like to point out about the Rough Country light is that it does feature a moisture breather, so in the event you do get some condensation in this thing over time, that will allow all that moisture to escape and clear up without any issue. Now, inside that housing, again, you will find 40 individual Cree LEDs, which do feature a combination of both spot and floodlight pattern. And basically, that's just going to offer a ton of coverage and throw, all equating to, again, 9,600 lumens of total output. Now, since this is the Black Series, the face of the light bar itself will obviously feature that black finish, as you can see, which I think kind of helps contribute to the stealthiness, if you will, of this light behind the actual grille. However, if you did want things to stand out a little bit more, you could always opt for Rough Country's chrome option instead, which will deliver everything this kit will deliver, but with that bright chrome face in place of the black option here for about 20 bucks more on the site. The second part of the kit will be the included bracketry that allows you to stash this bar behind your bumper without cutting or drilling. Now, the brackets themselves do feature a powder-coated steel construction and do position that bar perfectly behind the lower grille opening. Now, Rough Country does also include some hardware and some wiring, including a switch here that essentially makes this thing a turnkey kit. Now, a couple small notes on fitment here, guys. The site does claim this will fit all 2019 and newer Rams, with the exception of the Rebel and Classic models, so just keep that in mind. Last but not least, as you can see, Rough Country does also toss in a cover. A lot of states nowadays mandate that light bars be covered when not in use, so it is nice that they toss that in with this package. But now comes a time in the video where we want to show you just what it takes to get the bar and the wiring in place on your Ram at home. Now, we do have some reviews here on the site that have pointed out that this is pretty in-depth, just because the grille does need to be disassembled to get everything in place along with the wiring needed. So that's why the site's going to call this about 3 hours or so to get everything in place, maybe a little bit more if you don't wrench frequently. But without further ado, check out our detailed walkthrough and tool breakdown.
Tools used for this install are a powered or manual ratchet, a flathead screwdriver, a clip removal tool, 13mm socket, 12mm socket, 10mm socket, and a 6mm Allen. All right, so the first step of this install is going to be to remove the filler panel behind the lower grille on the front of the truck. You can do this on the ground, but it's a lot easier if you can have the truck up in the air. So let's get started. So I'm just going to use a flathead screwdriver and pry the little tabs for each of the clips that go around the filler panel behind the front lower grille and remove it from the truck. Now I'm just going to use a 10mm socket and a clip removal tool to remove the 1 bolt and 2 clips that hold the air dam support bracket on. All right, so now that the filler panel and the air dam support brackets are removed from the vehicle, you can get to these two bumper brackets on either side. You have to remove them, but save the bolts because you're going to be using those to attach the brackets for the light bar. I'm going to use a 13mm socket on my ratchet to remove them. So now that the bolts have been removed, we can start installing our new brackets. I'm going to use the same bolts that I just took out, and I'm going to loosely install the brackets until I have the light bar installed, and then I can tighten everything down to get everything lined up. Now we're ready to install our light bar. So now we are ready to install our light bar to our previously installed brackets that are up here in the depths of the bumper behind the lower grille. I'm going to snake the light bar in between the lower air dam and the bumper bracket that is kind of in my way, but if you sneak it in there properly, you should have no issues. So I'm using the provided hardware from Rough Country, and it's a small Allen-headed bolt, and it just goes into either side of the bracket into the holes that are in the light bar. So I know it's very, very difficult to see, but I'm going to use a 6mm Allen socket on a small ratchet to get to the bolt that attaches the light bar to the bracket on the back side of the bumper. It's a little bit tricky. If you have a 6mm Allen socket on a ratchet, it will make things easier. You can accomplish the same thing with a 6mm Allen wrench. It will just take you a little bit longer. All right, so now that we have the light bar bolted into the brackets, we can go ahead and tighten down the bracket bolts that we left loose in the previous step. All right, so now we're ready to start making our connections and routing our wire harness for the connection for the light. So what I'm gonna do, and there are a bunch of different ways you can do this, I'm going to drop my wire harness down from the top to connect it to my light bar, and then loosely route everything around so that it's away from anything hot or sharp before I start finally making all my connections at the battery. And I'll also be routing the wire through the firewall into the cab so that the switch is right next to the steering wheel. So let's go. All right, so for this step, what we're actually gonna do is disconnect the switch from the harness, and then we are going to feed this harness through the main harness grommet in the firewall into the cab, and then you'll just remake the connection for the switch on the other side of the dash underneath and be able to attach your switch next to the steering wheel. All right, so now that we have the wire harness passed through the grommet and the firewall underneath the dash, we can actually mount our switch next to our steering wheel like I previously mentioned and make our connection. So before I power up this wire harness and connect it to the battery, I'm gonna make my connections from the harness to the light bar itself and then make my connections for my relay and my battery. So now that I've got my wire harness routing and my switch mounted up in the cab, I can start running my wires for power, ground, and mounting my relay. What I'm gonna do is mount my relay to one of the ground studs here in the engine bay, and I'm also going to mount my ground to one of the ground studs in the engine bay and run my power wire over to the battery positive post. All you'll need is a 10mm socket and a 12mm socket. And that's it. And that's gonna wrap up this review and install of the Rough Country 20-inch Black Series LED light bar hidden bumper kit for your 19 to 20 Ram 1500. Thanks for watching, and for all things Ram, keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.